Good morning. Welcome to day 2 of Building Resilience. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Marty Durbin. I'm our Senior Vice President of Policy here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm really pleased to be with you here today. And even more pleased to welcome Elliot Stultz, who is the Senior Vice President, Deputy General Counsel, and Chief Sustainability Officer at Allstate. And let me just say first, Elliot, not only welcome, but just wanted to thank you and thank Allstate for the partnership that we've had with you and a broader stakeholder of groups have really focused on trying to build smart, resilient infrastructure and to see the passage of pre-disaster mitigation policies that help facilitate that, like the Storm Act and the community disaster resilience zones, funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, and many more. But to start with and to get back to basics, and as you know, after we might be a little bit preaching to the choir here, but I wanted to get your views on what's the business case for resilience?
Gosh, so that's a loaded question. But I want to start by saying, first of all, thank you, Marty, and thank you to the Chamber for including me and including Allstate in this event. Sustainability and resiliency in particular is a very, very important issue, and it makes me so happy to see us having this dialogue today. Resiliency is important to me, it's important to Allstate, it's important to our chairman, Tom Wilson. When I think back on the dialogue around climate over time, so much of it has focused on mitigation. And mitigation is clearly a very, very important issue, and we are very focused on mitigation. We have established net zero goals. We are talking a lot about mitigation. But that dialogue has almost crowded out the topic of resiliency. And we all know that mitigation has its limitations. There's a lot of uncertainty around how successful the world is going to be in its mitigation efforts. And these storms are increasing in severity, increasing in frequency. 10 years ago, we paid out on approximately 80 severe weather events each year. Today, on average, we pay out on approximately 100 events a year. So a conversation about resiliency is critical. We cannot wait. And in some ways, I think the dialogue around resiliency represents the maturation of the dialogue, the evolution of the dialogue to include both mitigation and resiliency. So I applaud the Chamber for recognizing 13 years ago that we need to be talking about resiliency. I think that was really foresighted. And it's interesting to me because I've also seen that evolution not among subject matter experts, but just among communities. And I'll give an example of that. I live in New England in the summer in a small community about half a mile away from a very low-lying beach. And that low-lying beach has a historic structure with a carousel, a merry-go-round in it. And after a storm a number of years ago, the community discovered that that structure had been compromised and it needed a lot of structural work done to it. And the dialogue a few years ago was all about how much was it going to cost, how are we going to fund it, what would the design look like, what would happen to the food concession stand. And to my surprise, actually, that dialogue evolved until last year the community recognized that it did not make sense to replace a historic building that might very well have to be rebuilt again in 10 years. And the community recognized that by 2050, that beach, because it's so low-lying, is not expected to be there. And it did not make sense to rebuild this historic carousel in a location that would not be there in 2050. Of course, I'm sad to see the loss of a historic structure, an iconic structure, but I was very proud to see the evolution of the dialogue to focus on what the situation going forward. So again, I applaud the Chamber for having the foresight many years ago to to identify resiliency as a topic. So I work at Allstate, the insurance company, and I'm sorry to go on so long, but for me, it's very easy to talk about climate because when you think about it, climate change is at the core of what we do. If we cannot manage climate risk, we cannot live into our commitments to our customers and our communities, and we can't meet the expectations of our shareholders. So in terms of the business case, which was what your question was referring to, it's very easy for an insurance company to talk about the business case because it's really at the core of what we do. In 2022 and 2023, Allstate paid out more in claims than it received in premiums. Well, that's not a formula for success. So I think we can very clearly make the business case about the need to address the situation. It was interesting in terms of the business case. I read an interesting article in the paper yesterday, which was talking about the condominium market in Florida. I live in a condominium on the water in Florida, so I was, of course, interested in that. After the Surfside condominium collapsed in Florida a number of years ago, Florida enacted much more stringent building codes, which Allstate has been advocating for. We also advocate for consistent enforcement of those stronger building codes. And as a result of those changes, many condominiums in Florida, including my own, have had to engage in very costly structural repairs. As a result, that's resulted in assessments for homeowners, and homeowners who have been unable to afford those assessments have been selling their condominiums, depressing the condominium market. And I was struck reading that article. What more compelling reason can we have to build resilience than the loss of lives, the protection of lives? Yet this article was really focused on the business case. So I think we need to make the business case in order to convince folks that they need to be focused on these issues.
So Elliot, let me ask you, obviously there's this clear and obvious connection between resilience and the climate debate and what needs to be done. But in your experience with Allstate, what do we need to be doing with it? What are the partnerships that we're going to need to succeed? Are there technologies? Are there tools? What's the data that might be important for us to be able to advance a clear agenda here?
So there are any number of partnerships that I think are needed. None of us in this room or elsewhere can address this situation alone. It will require public-private partnerships, and we all need to be involved. We would like to see, as I said, stronger building codes. We would like to see stronger enforcement of those building codes. We'd like to see greater preparedness, stronger evacuation plans, adequate staffing for first responders, changes in laws. There are any number of requirements that will require partnerships both with the public sector and the private sector. The one thing I like about resilience as opposed to mitigation, and mitigation, again, I want to emphasize, is critical that we all be discussing mitigation. But the one thing I like about resilience is who can be opposed to resilience? Everyone wants to be resilient. I think it may help us avoid more partisan discussions, right, and enable us to build strong public-private partnerships and partnership among peer organizations so that we can address the issue.
So as you and I were discussing in the back room, an opportunity to reframe the dialogue that sometimes gets a little heated on climate change around something that everybody can be for, and then build out from that.
Right, exactly.
I know Allstate, of course, has tons of data. You've talked about some of what is paid, has been paid out, but obviously that all gets built off a lot of data that you have on your customers and what's happening in various areas. How do you see that as a real tool, or are there additional research that would be really helpful that can again help to drive the dialogue and debate around this?
Well, I think getting back to the business case, I think to the extent we can show that pre-disaster preparation and mitigation can be much more effective and much more efficient than post-disaster recovery. I think it will help communities be more prepared. I think it will help communities rebuild more quickly. I think it will help small businesses be stronger. So I think we can make a very compelling case that pre-disaster preparation is really what we need to focus on. We, as you mentioned, Allstate has a lot of data. When you think of the number of people that we insure, the number of households that we pay claims on, we have climate scientists on our staff. We have a very robust risk management department. That is all very rich data that can help inform this dialogue and help advance these partnerships. So I certainly think that's very important.
As kind of wrapping things up here, I would say what I take away from what you're sharing with us here is there's reason for optimism. And for us that there are tools we can use and partnerships we can build and help, again, as we said, reframing the debate here to really drive this forward. So as I started with, I wanted to thank you again for the great partnership, and also just in the recognition of what the Chamber's been doing here, remind everybody that 3 weeks from now, we're going to continue this dialogue and get a little more focused on the policy agenda needed at our Sustainability and Circular Economy Summit. So if you haven't already seen the invitations for that, please reach out and let us know. We'd love to have you participate there as well. And then just please join me in thanking Elliot for sharing with us this morning.
Thank you.